It is a very emotional time for me coming here because growing up in the ministry, the one church that believed so much in what I was doing as a young minister in apologetics was Nairobi Chapel. Secondly, I took a radical path in the music ministry. From very early, I saw through all the contradictions in church. And so I decided to go a different way with songwriting. You know, I was among the first ones to write gospel reggae and, tried my lips on rap. It didn't work. But I was trying to demystify the whole area of genres and so on. And the home that welcomed me most was Nairobi Chapel. And so now you enjoy a lot of the contemporary Christian music, especially in worship and so on. Some of it I heard this morning. But we paid a price at the Kenyatta University's Christian Union. I was almost ostracized. In one of the concerts in Eldoret, we had about 4,000 young people, and I was launching my reggae album, and the church got so offended with the music, they turned off the power and stopped the concert at the third song. And so we did the altar call without sound. And the next morning, they were purifying the sanctuary with water and Omo. I say these things as they are because Christians do strange things, but we sort of sanitize them. We are so hard on the politicians and everybody else except ourselves. And a lot of rogue things go on in the church, including strange doctrines on disability. In fact, let me tell you what I'm going to do first. So I'm going to do 5 things, and then I'll be done. First, I'll just share my story briefly as way of testimony so that we demystify a lot of what we are talking about this month. But I'll be sharing my testimony as an indicator that there is a big God at work doing amazing things in spite and despite of disability. First of all, the biographical stuff. I was 3 years old going 4 when my parents realized that I was becoming blind. And it happened at a meal. You know, the way the Luya ugalis are so huge. So you reach out your hand, we eat with our hands, and I'm not ashamed of it. And I missed the plate. And my mother goes, "What? Are you becoming blind?" Little did she know that I was actually becoming blind. But it's what happened next that fascinates me. Because my mother and my family at large did so many different things to try and help me regain my sight. I had contracted cataracts, and of course, if you don't attend to cataracts in good time, you lose your sight. So attend to them as quickly as you can. So the first thing they did was looked for the famous preachers of the time that were also doing miracle healing. So they went to look for the famous preacher in Western Kenya called Kaguli. Those my age and thereabout that come from the region would know he was like the Benny Hinn or the T.L. Osborne of the day. And so they don't know, my parents were not people of means, so they would walk with me on the back. And they would walk maybe 10 kilometers or 12 kilometers looking for Kaguli. And my mother tells me, she repeated this about 3 days ago when I was at home to celebrate my birthday in the village. Any Marchian here? Happy birthday. So she said sometimes she would get tired carrying me on the back. Thank God for mothers. Then she would hand me over to my 10-year-old sister to carry me. And every time I think of the sacrifices and the love and so on that went into who I am today, I say, you guys don't know anything about what parents do in order to take care of the children that are living with disability. And notice every time, by the way, I use disability instead of disabilities, because it's a condition. It's not like something you can go to the supermarket and buy 4 of them. So it is what the apologists would call, it's a privation, something that ought to be there but is not there. So I do recall, of course, growing up and doing all the stuff with the other children and playing the games that everybody plays. And if you go home, they tell stories of good and bad things that I did to fellow children. And sooner or later, my mother was taking me to school. So I went to school 1 year later than everybody else because it was hard to find a school that would accept me. So I went to Kibo's School for the Blind and, later on Thika High School for the Blind and all that. What made the difference? Acceptance. Today, I am who I am because I was accepted, I was loved. And even in terms of going to school, when I went to Moi University for my journalism and media studies, I remember the lecturers and the love they poured on me. Any book I needed to read, and by the way, I read in Braille, but I also read electronically. And because a lot of books are not in Braille, what happened was different from Kenyatta University, because at Kenyatta University, we experienced the love from the Dean of Students. He would line up readers that would come, and give an hour, volunteer an hour to read, all these different books. And sometimes, I had pity on them. I mean, they would be reading and reading every week. And by the way, that's how I met my first wife, because she was one of my readers. God does amazing things with such things. And so at Moi University, the lecturers loved on me because anything I wanted in PDF, and that's how I read most, electronically using OCR, optical character recognition, so it's text-to-speech on the computer. And by the way, I have so much to tell you. I also use an iPhone, just for the record, because a lot of people, when I post on X or Facebook, they say, and who is typing for him? My phone is with my wife down there. And the iPhone is probably the thing that is the best thing that happened to persons living with disability. And so just quickly, I learned to type early, and so with PDF support and all of that, I was able to pull through my master's program. And God willing, I'll be graduating in July with my PhD. And the same thing, it's not like my wife is reading for me. In fact, she complains that I'm staying up too long, and so on. But with that kind of support, you can climb the heights, you can do so much. I want to say something here as I enter my message that is maybe unsayable in most Christian spaces. But I want to say, when it comes to inclusion, perhaps one of the most difficult places for persons living with disability is church. And I say this as a Christian with love. And it's because the Christian, the average Christian, especially in Africa, comes with so much baggage of belief and all kinds of imaginations. The African Christian makes it very difficult for persons with disability to be inclusive, to be included in the society. So that the first thing that hits you is cultural beliefs. You're not supposed to belong. You're supposed to be hidden somewhere. And so when they see a child with disability or a parent carrying a child with a disability or someone walking with a cane or trying to cross a zebra crossing, the first thing is sympathy and, like woye kind of thing. And, or they also believe maybe if you have one disability that you have all the others. So, for example, they'll come to the car and they want to greet me. And they will tell my wife, please say hi to him. And so you have those kinds of things. Now, on Facebook, it becomes even more interesting. When I declared in 2021 that I was going to run for president, the first thing that I that hit me was from believers. And they said, we love your singing. Please keep singing. It's a polite way to tell you that you're only fit for a song. That's the average Christian for you. Or they will come with all these cliches, Muiru failed, or like Kiapi didn't make it. You'll fail like Margaret Wanjiru. Margaret Wanjiru, by the way, made it, but they make it look like she didn't. So they judge you by your faith, that as a Christian, you're not going to make it. And so, if the system is so hard on you, like it was in 2022 for me, they say, yeah, right, we told you. You're good for a song. And never mind, you might actually be the best candidate. And just for the record, because I think we live in Christian circles that don't want to hear this, for the record, I am going to be running again. And so when I approach this topic this day, I want you to see some things about God and disability that you have refused to see. When I read the scriptures, I encounter a God that is not embarrassed about disability. He's not shy to talk about or display persons living with disability. In fact, he makes so many exceptions or inclusions. So you find someone like Moses with a speech deficiency. And he chooses Moses to lead the children of Israel out of Egypt into the promised land. He doesn't say, Moses, you're a stammerer, step aside. He uses him. And Moses actually comes with those cultural excuses and says, Lord, I don't know how to speak, and so on. And God asks Moses in Exodus 4:11, Moses, I have a question for you, actually a couple. Moses, who made man's mouth? Who makes him dumb or unable to speak or blind, and so on? He asks those questions in Exodus 4:11. And the Christian says, the devil. But that verse concludes with, is it not I, the Lord? So God is not ashamed. God uses people even with the craziest deficiencies, as we shall see in a little bit. People like Miriam with ethnicity complexes. Miriam and Aaron, the brothers of Moses, did not want Moses to marry an Ethiopian, a black woman. You think it began today with 2007 and 8 and all these the Rwanda crisis, the genocide? Ethnicity has always been there. In fact, Israel always thought that they're better than everybody else until God would take them into captivity to teach them lessons that everybody else matters as well. And in Jesus' day, he doesn't send Jesus to Rome. He sends him to Egypt. Africa. I have stories about that in my books. So God is not embarrassed about disability. In fact, every time I read Isaiah 42, verse 16, I get goosebumps. The Lord is saying, I will lead the blind in ways they have not known, and I will not forsake them. Then I meet Jesus. For the team, if you're trying to keep up with me, I'm on my second point. I have reversed this. And so I have 4 points, and I begin with the second. And that is, Jesus Christ is actually interested in disability and those that are going through stress and trouble. So Jesus would find somebody born blind, and reason with them. You find people with different diseases, and he would help them out. Lepers and those who are paralyzed and those who are lame and so on, and he would do something about it. What fascinates me is that Jesus spent time with them, asked them questions, interacted with them. What would you want me to do for you? Would you like me to help you, kind of thing. Jesus interacted with them. And, he talked with them. And he changed society's way of thinking. In John 9, we have a stereotype. Jesus encounters his own disciples. And there is this man born blind. And Jesus comes, he interacts with them. They ask him, Jesus, whose sin was it that this man was born blind? Is it his own sin, or was it his parents' sin? So you give those Luya alternatives. It's a curse from the ancestors and so on, and the panel hinted on that. Or maybe you come to the televangelists that you need something taken care of in your past, or you do not have enough faith, and so on and so forth. You have all those kinds of things. I have met friends who had more faith for me to see than I did. And they took me into a bush, and, I thought we were going for a prayer meeting, only for them to tell me, God has told me, you will see now. So I said, it would be nice, And so they would do all the gymnastics and so on. They want me to see so bad. I say, I want to see so bad as well. But God has not allowed it. And he's not threatened by it. And so when it comes to, the whole picture of disability, I do believe that we focus so much on the outside, so much on a missing hand or a missing leg or a weak leg, and then we focus so much, he's led up the stage to, So we focus on the outside. But as a blind person living with disability, I've had a lot of introspection, and I've come to the conclusion that actually there is much more happening on the inside than on the outside. A lot of the situations we have with disability today, by the way, are a result of things by other people that happened on the inside. And so as I'm focusing on a deeper healing, I want us to go beyond Reuben's missing sight. I want us to go beyond, somebody's wheelchair. I want us to go beyond, an accident that happened. And by the way, and most accidents are because of moral deficiencies. I want us to go beyond and realize that our world is in a mess because of inner problems, inner disabilities. My brothers and sisters, with all humility, I tell you today, if being able to see and walk and being able to do things with your muscles could fix the economy of Kenya, then tell me why seeing people have messed up our country. If sight and so on would bring peace in these homes, then why do we have domestic violence? It's not because somebody missed a cheek to slap. We have domestic violence, all these femicides, and all this corruption. Actually, it's not corruption, it's theft. Because of an inner disability. And we have a lot of disabled people in companies, in these professions. We have a lot of disabled people in the Kenya government. Morally deficient. Anything they see, they want. Anything that looks good, they grab. That is a disability, a serious disability. I'm sure there are bankers in this room, or there might be some in watching online. And I ask the question, why is it pens are chained in banks? Because Kenyans are disabled. If you leave that pen in the hands of most people, they will leave the counter with it. Why is it we have all these scandals? KEMSA, you have SGR, you have all these scandals. Why is it we have that? Because some people are so disabled that they must change figures. They must misappropriate in order to feel good, in order to feel nice, in order to be alive. That's what they live for. And I can go on. But when I read the Bible, I find interesting answers. And two quick passages as we progress with this. I'm back to my first point. We need deeper healing because I think we do not understand what diseases really are. I don't think we fully grasp what illness is. We can define it in so many different ways. But healing is holistic. It is not just physical. It's restoration of health, yes, well-being, all those wholeness after injury, illness, social or emotional distress. It's all that. It involves physical, emotional, or psychological, spiritual, social, or community healing. It is broad. Healing is huge. And there are so many fake healings going on that we must, be aware of. There are variations of them. You have this thing called placebo. A placebo is a false treatment. You get a substance that looks like the original, sometimes used for research purposes to sort of test the efficacy of something, and so on. But placebo healing is all over the place, even in church. A lot of fake healing. You are promised healing, but it's not healing. And we have to be aware of it. Then we have people who believe that they can attain healing by witchcraft or sorcery. And you would think they are found out there. A lot of Christians visit witch doctors. Even at Nairobi Chapel, I'm sure you might find a few. That when you have a problem, instead of praying, you look for the person who will make somebody eat grass or, make them have, instead of turning to God. I still remember in the Bible asking, is it because there was no God in Israel that you went to look for other gods? Then you have a lot of hypnosis. It's a variation of healing that deceives a lot of people. Can all of you say for a moment with me, white, white, white. White, white, white. White, white, white. What do cows drink? So many people told me milk because I managed to hypnotize you. When I put an image in your mind and you repeat it so many times, it's very easy for me to hypnotize you. And so people will repeat some things and use religious stuff on you, and then they will pounce on you with a lie, sometimes even with healing promises. Then they don't happen. But thank God there are miracles that do happen, and God actually does perform miracles. I believe in miracles. Supernatural interventions in nature. But I must say, God also works in time with medicine and all of these different things. And so Christ the healer is interested in all of that. And Christ embodies the deepest healing that you could ever have. Turn with me for a moment to Isaiah 55. We'll read two passages, and then I'll be done. I'll show you some things about healing that come out of this passage. I'll show you some things that come out of this passage, and then we'll close. So Isaiah 53. I had always read this passage as a salvation passage. I had not quite seen it as an identity passage regarding inner healing. And when I was preparing to speak to you, for the first time, it hit me so hard that Jesus actually lived with disability. When you look at the passage, you will realize that when he was going to the cross, he was so disfigured, I doubt that he could be able to walk. Not even sure that he could see. But Jesus went through so much. So Isaiah asks, who has believed our message? And to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? He grew up before him like a tender shoot, and like a root out of dry ground. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him. Nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and familiar with suffering. Like one from whom men hide their faces, he was despised, and we esteemed him not. Verse 4, surely he took up our infirmities and carried our sorrows. Yet we considered him stricken by God, smitten by him, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was upon him, and by his wounds we are healed. We all, like sheep, had gone astray. Each of us has turned to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. Verse 7, he was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before her shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth. By oppression and judgment he was taken away. And who can speak of his descendants? For he was cut off from the land of the living. For the transgression of my people, he was stricken. He was assigned a grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death, though he had done no violence, nor was any deceit in his mouth. Verse 10, yet it was the Lord's will to crush him and cause him to suffer. And though the Lord makes his life a guilt offering, he will see his offspring and prolong his days, for the will of the Lord will prosper in his hand. Now, I looked at that passage and I said to myself, if anyone was going to experience deep healing, then Isaiah 53 is really the cure. It's the medicine, because it portrays to us Jesus, who actually conducts deep healing. And he touches deep spaces. Now, what are some of these deep spaces he touches? I'll go over some rather quickly because of time. The first space he touches is ecology, the natural order. And that you can see in Genesis chapter 3, when we have the fall, he deals with that because he's the fulfillment of the promise of salvation. And you see that. You also see Isaiah 11, the shoot from the stem of Jesse, coming to correct ecology, where the lamb can lie down with the lion, and where a little child can put his hand in the hole of the cobra. Everything is at a place of equilibrium. And you can see Paul writing about it in Romans 8:19, that Jesus actually will restore or will heal nature. The second space he touches deeply is self-esteem. Low self-esteem and identity issues. When you look at what has happened in the world, you realize that a lot of people live with low self-esteem. And Jesus comes to the scene and offers healing. He offers healing. In Isaiah chapter 53 and verse 2, it says, he grew up before him like a tender shoot, and like a root out of dry ground. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him. Nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. And when I think about all these identity issues, I realize that Jesus took it all in his body. And, if you've ever dealt with the feeling that maybe you don't look so good, or you try to change the way you live because you want better conditions and so on, there is a solution in Jesus because he deals with that identity issue head on. Another deep space he touches is rejection. If you look at verse 3, he says, he was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and familiar with suffering. Rejection is so common, and it can turn somebody into a disabled space. It can actually make you completely unable to even live or perform anything. Some people, because of rejection, can't even go to work. Another deep space is sorrow and grief. Verse 3 again. Sorrow all over the place. Pain. Depression. Another thing that Jesus embodies is infirmities and afflictions. Verse 4, he was afflicted. Jesus was. He was actually afflicted. Surely he took up our infirmities and carried our sorrows, yet we considered him stricken by God, smitten by him, and afflicted. Jesus was afflicted. And so he can share in that space. And he is the only one who can heal that deep. Another thing is sin, another deep space. And of course, the world doesn't like to be told about sin. But sin is probably the greatest thing that Jesus can heal that would take care of a lot of things. I've given you like 5 different Greek words there to show you the different kinds of sins, that exist. Harmatia, that is missing the mark. Paraptoma, that is asleep or a lapse. There is parabasis, which is, transgression or violation, breaking a law or a commandment. Asebeia, which is ungodliness, impiety, lack of reverence for God. And then adikia, and righteousness or injustice, actions that go contrary to what is right or what is just. A lot of that. Now, you don't associate Jesus with social injustice and so on, or the police brutality, the femicide and so on, but that is sin. And he deals with it. So if you really wanted to fix the society, you put Jesus at the center. Because he went through a lot of this himself. In fact, if you come to verse 7 and 8, Jesus can touch a deep space for those who have gone through oppression, injustice, and ill treatment. What does it say in verse 7? He said, he was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before her shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth. Talk about injustice. A lot of people living with unspoken things that have been done to them, or their children, even children with disability. Some of us live with things we cannot speak. Verse 8 says, by oppression and judgment, he was taken away. And who can speak of his descendants? For he was cut off from the land. What does that bring to you? Family disconnection, death, deprivation, all of these things the Son of God took upon himself. And the ramifications are so many. Even if you wanted to talk about lack of freedom, disease and disability, as we shall see in closing here, what I would call a thorn in the flesh, you find that Jesus actually takes care of that. In 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 7 to 10, Paul talks about a condition that he had, a thorn in the flesh. And he prays to God 3 times for God to take it away. But God says, Paul, I'll not take it away. My grace is sufficient for you. Sufficient for you. And so I'll take you through this, Paul, tutatembea pamoja. And so I look at it and I ask, kwani, what was Paul going through? And sometimes I have a hint in Galatians 4:15 when he says, I know that some of you would be so ready to pluck off your eyes and give them to me. So it gives me a hint that he maybe have been suffering with some eye challenges, sight issues. And again in Galatians 6:11, he says, see how large letters I have used to write to you. That is small or large print. Glasses issues. And so he says he had this thorn in the flesh. Maybe he prayed, Lord, itoa tu, so that I can serve you better. He said, no, I'll not take it away. And so going back to John 9, when Jesus encounters his disciples, they give him options. Is it his parents' sin or his own sin? Jesus says neither. He says, this happened so that the works of God would be made manifest. So there's always a trichotomy rather than a dichotomy. There is always God's picture. Your way, my way, and then God's way. And we are better off with God's way. What are the ramifications as I close? First of all, when I think about the gospel coming to Africa through the Ethiopian eunuch, more Sudanese actually, Nubian, he's called an Ethiopian eunuch. A eunuch has been castrated so that he can work for the queen. And he's reading Isaiah 53. Philip explains this passage to him. What do you think that meant to a eunuch whose body was mutilated for service to a queen? Powerful implications. But when you look at all this, there are several things. First of all, Christ suffered disability, stigmatization, and exclusion. For sure, he had no beauty, no majesty to attract us to him, and so on at the point of the cross. I think Jesus was disfigured so badly, he would be treated as someone living with severe disability. Christ experienced grief, anguish, sorrow, and depression. Those are going through mental stress. Gethsemane. Lord, take this cup from me, but your will be done. Christ faced social injustice, including false accusation and execution. He was killed. Christ, is God with us. Emmanuel, that becomes the cure for all psychological illness, because a lot of them are caused by the absence of presence. You are not there for people. God says he's Emmanuel, God with us. As a shoot out of David, he will restore ecology. Christ, is going to restore government. The government will be on his shoulders, Isaiah 9. The Prince of Peace and conflict resolution, Isaiah 9:6 again. And Christ, the holistic healer, is not just our Savior, but our all in all. I don't know where you are this morning. I take a lot of courage and comfort in knowing that Jesus not only interacted with people like me, that Jesus did not only interact with, those who needed healing, but he interacted with those who needed the deepest healing, and that is the problem of sin. When you read John 3:16, yes, it's a gospel verse. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, so that whosoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. For me, it's not so much just about love. For me, the word that hits me so hard in that passage is the whosoever. Whosoever. there is no exclusion. And I used to think I was excluded. I'll be sharing a bit about that in the next service. When I realized that God includes me in his plan, everything changed for me. And so there will be changing times as I serve the Lord in the church, in music ministry, in the teaching ministry, and studies and all of that. As I serve the Lord in the place of justice, because I'm very prolific there. As I serve the Lord in the apologetics ministry, and even taking apologetics to the political space. I know there will be so much criticism, all that stigmatization and exclusion. But my life has changed because I look at a bigger picture, at a God who walks with me in those spaces. Some of them are dangerous. In fact, I have told my friends, I am a very, very easy target in terms of security. But here I am. And you think I'm looking back? I won't. I lay my life down, not just for the church, but also for my country and my family. And so, if God could do all these stuff in me, I want you to go home today knowing that it's not just enough for Reuben to be a guinea pig for you guys. It is true that there is a big God that is at work, healing the deepest of spaces. One of the greatest healings he conducted for me was in 2022 when I felt really, really abused by the electoral system for no good reason. Just left out and, go to court and they go to the Court of Appeal just to ensure I'm locked out of the ballot. And at that point, you actually want thunder to strike and finish somebody. Then you remember, I am a Christian. Forgive if you want to be forgiven. It was so hard for me to forgive Chebukati. It was hard, but I did. And I felt free. I felt so free. Even when he was dying, I really felt it for the family. It was not for me like, yeah, right, no. For me, I could feel with the family as a Christian and say, Lord, comfort the family, and actually mean it because of a deeper healing that Christ can conduct in the heart of someone. Some of you need to let go. Some of you need to just love a little more people living with disability. Some of you need to create spaces in your employment. Some of you need to give us an opportunity to run like President Gus Dur of Indonesia, who was blind, like Roosevelt, who was paralyzed, like Kibaki, who was sworn in on a wheelchair. We are coming. Please include us as well. God bless you.